Hi everyone, welcome back to German Girl in London. Today's video is going to be about London myths. So a comment I get a lot, especially under the videos I've made about money in London and just videos in general about living in London, people comment a lot of things like, oh, if you want to live in London you have to make at least X amount of money. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of myths about London and living in London that I would like to debunk today. So I made a little list on my phone, of course. So the first myth that a lot of people seem to think is that every Londoner is rich, or every Londoner makes at least 50k, because otherwise you can't live in London because it's so expensive. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you that London is expensive. It is, but it's not true that everyone in London makes a lot of money. I know plenty of people on very normal wages. I come from a creative industry, and a lot of people that I know work in the creative industry, and just like it is in every other city, every other country, the creative industry is not the best paid industry. So no, unless you're like a lawyer or a banker or some other prestigious job, you're not going to make 50, 60, 70k from the get-go. That's just not going to happen. So when I very first came to London, I was a waitress and I made £6 an hour. I only did that for about 3 months. And then my first proper full-time job, I was on, I think I was actually on 14k plus bonus, which brought me up to about 17.5k. And I had that job for nearly 2 years. And I lived totally fine on that salary. I think my salary must have worked out about £1,100. My rent at the time, sharing a flat, was 380 a month or something like that, and then my bills were pretty low, travel on top. I still had plenty of money to spend, I had money to save, and it was completely fine. So I think this is a myth that, you know, everyone in London makes a lot of money, or that it's impossible to live in London on a low salary. So many people here are on minimum wage, on very low income jobs, and you know, they make it work. It's not that suddenly just because you're in London, you know, you can't survive. But yeah, obviously, yes, the rents are higher, and it is better to make a bit more in London, and generally you can make a bit more in London than elsewhere, but it doesn't mean that everyone is rich, or that when you come here you're just going to be offered like a 100k job. That's just not the case, sorry. Myth number 2 is that everyone's posh and at least middle class. Now, this myth also really contradicts the next myth that I'll mention after this. But again, not everyone in London is posh. In fact, I always get told that I sound like a peasant because I have a bit of a London accent, so people don't think that the London accent sounds very posh. So in turn, no, not everyone in London is posh. Of course you get those people, you know, we see on Made in Chelsea, that kind of thing, who go to horse races and God knows, and yeah, people here can be sometimes posh, but everywhere. Like if you go to Liverpool, you'll find posh people in Liverpool. If you go to Manchester, you'll find some posh people in Manchester. But I don't think that you can go to London and be like, everyone here is posh. There's a lot of working class people. So no, not everyone's posh, and like I said earlier, not everyone's rich, so not everyone is middle class or upper class. So yeah. The next point is, which also, again, under my videos, a lot of people say this. They say, oh, you know, London, no one speaks English, or like hardly anyone speaks English, hardly anyone is British. That's a comment I get so much, and I think it's so contradictory to the everyone in London is rich, everyone in London is posh, but then for some reason also London is made up of not British people, and also no one speaks English, which is so weird. So no, that's obviously not true. Like obviously if you go on a bus or the underground, you'll hear all sorts of languages. You'll hear Korean, you'll hear a lot of German, you'll hear Spanish, you'll hear, I don't know, there's a lot of tourists. So yes, you'll hear a lot of international languages, but the overarching language is always English. So you don't just go in a shop and they won't understand you. Like everywhere people speak English. Very, very rarely that people don't speak English. And even if they don't speak the best English, they speak enough English to understand you. So yeah, I don't think I ever had a situation where I couldn't communicate with someone in London. So that is not true. The next myth is that it is always loud everywhere in London. It's just so hectic, so loud. And that is also not true. Yes, if you go to Oxford Street and you stand there for an hour, it's constantly loud, it's constantly crowded, it's pretty awful. But London is huge. You can travel from one point to the other. It can take you an hour and a half and you haven't even made it all the way through London. We have huge parks like Richmond Park. There are so many places where you wouldn't even really know that you're in London. So there's plenty of opportunity to go somewhere where it's really quiet, quaint, and, you know, away from all the hustle and bustle from the city. So no, it's not always loud, always busy, and always crowded. In the main parts, yes, it is, obviously, but there's a lot of places where it's not. So I live in a little kind of more suburb type part of London, and it doesn't even feel like I'm in London most of the time. I mean, it's nice that I can go into central London in like 20 minutes, but you know, you wouldn't really know that I'm in London if you didn't know from just looking at my street. So that's always really nice. And then also on my list is the last thing, actually, and it is that there is no sense of community in London. So there are nearly 9 million people in London, and like I said earlier, it's huge. So you can literally travel an hour, 2 hours, and you're still in London. So you won't have like the same community feel that you have like in a village or in a small town. Obviously, I'm not going to get to know 9 million people. That's obviously just not possible. But everywhere, pretty much everywhere, I think except maybe one or two times because I didn't live there long enough, had community parties. So where I live now, they just had a street party where they just closed up the street and just had a little party there. And then there's like a party for my general area, and you know, there's just a lot of things that are very reminiscent of small town things. So maybe London as a whole doesn't come together to have a party, but all the little individual areas do things together. So when I lived in East Finchley, my council and the community around it always organised like this party there, and there is a community feel. So, you know, I feel like a part of the community where I live now, which is not big, but it's part of London. So I don't think that that's true. And as a whole, I don't know, it's just a weird, it's hard to explain, but I feel like a Londoner, even though, again, I don't know everyone in London, and it's not like you could, but just it's kind of more like a way of life than just living here. So you just become part of a bigger community in that sense. So there is a sense of community here. It's just different than to what a lot of people know, I think. So yeah, these are some myths I wanted to talk about, and yeah, feel free to argue with me in the comments if you want to. Subscribe if you haven't and you'd like to be, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!